Hi guys, welcome back to the session. Today we will solve another RPA challenge, that is invoice extraction. Now the goal of this challenge is to create a workflow which will read each of these rows from the table across all the pages. And the records where the due date has passed or is today, download the respective invoice and extract few details such as invoice number, date, balance due and company name. Now in this challenge, they have also provided a CSV template. Let me open this one. So you'll have to write all the extracted data here. So this ID and due date you will get from the table. Let me show you here. So this ID and due date you will get from the table and the respective invoice number, invoice date, company name and total due you will get from the respective invoice. So let's see how we can create this project in UiPath. For this project, there are two levels of data extraction. First one is extracting this table, for which we will use the data scraping functionality of UiPath. And to extract the data from the invoices, we will use document understanding, which includes intelligent OCR and machine learning extractors. So let's begin to build our project. Let's move to UiPath. Let's build our project here. First of all, I'm going to launch this URL in a browser. So for this, I'm going to use an activity here called Open Browser. So let me add this activity here and I'm going to provide this URL. So let's take this URL and let's provide it here. Now the browser type I'm going to choose as Chrome and let's assign the UI browser a variable. So I'm going to create this variable browser RPA challenge. And once this URL is launched, we'll have to click on this start button. So let me add the click activity here and let's indicate this element inside browser. So let's indicate this start button. So this is done. Once the user clicks on start button, after that the workflow should extract the data from this table. Now to extract data from this table, I'm going to use the data scraping functionality. So let's move to UiPath, move to flowchart and select this data scraping from here. Now before using this data scraping, let me move to the first page and this is the extract wizard. Let's hit next and first of all let's indicate this ID and click on that. Now here it says you select a table cell. Would you like to extract the data from whole table? So yes, we want to extract data from whole table, but if you click yes here, so here you see this serial number, date and due date has been extracted, but we also require the invoice URL which has not been extracted if we use this process. So let's move back and let's hit next again, highlight this invoice and this time we will select these ID, due date and invoices individually, not as a table cell. So highlight this ID and select no and we will create a pattern. So hit next and select another ID. Let's give the column name as ID and hit next. So IDs has been extracted. Now to extract the due date, let's select this extract correlated data and indicate this due date. And again we will create a pattern. So hit next and select another due date. This has been extracted. Let's provide a name here. I will provide the name as due date and hit next. And the ID and due date has been extracted properly. Now to extract this invoice URLs, let's hit extract correlated data and highlight this invoice. Now make sure that you do not highlight this complete cell, otherwise the invoice URL won't be extracted. So you'll have to highlight this download button and click on that. Now we'll create a pattern. So hit next and select another download button and click on that. This has been done. Now for the invoice, we do not require to extract the text. We require the URL. So I will uncheck this one and check this extract URL. Let me provide the column name as URL and hit next. Now this invoice due date and URL has been extracted from the first page successfully. Now let's hit finish. And then it is asking, is data spanning across multiple pages? So yes, our data is across multiple pages. So I'll hit yes, and we'll have to indicate this next button. So indicate this next button, and we are done with the data scraping. Let me connect them. Now if you open this data scraping, let's see what all we have here. So this is the attached browser activity. Here I'm going to add this browser which we created, that is called browser RPA challenge. Browser type will be Chrome, that is fine. Selector is not required, so I'm removing this one. Next is this activity. The complete data has been extracted and stored inside this extract data table. So you see here will be the variable extract data table. We can change the scope here to flowchart. Now to see what all data got extracted, let me add the output data table activity here. So let me add this output data table. Here I will provide the extract data table variable and the result will be a string. Let's give a name here, dt as string, and we'll display this one inside a message box. So let me add a message box here, and let's provide the variable dt as string. So we are done with the data scraping. Let me quickly run this project to see how the data scraping works. So for that I'm going to close this. UiPath is going to open this URL of its own, and let's save this one and let's quickly run this. And my project is running now. It is launching the URL in the Chrome browser. Now I clicked on the start button and it scraped the data from all the 3 pages. And here is the complete data which got scraped across the table. Now here you see, as of now we have the columns ID, due date and URL, but as mentioned in the sample, we also require invoice number, invoice date, company name and total due, which we will get from the invoices. So for that, what I'm going to do, first of all I'm going to add 4 more columns in this data table, and then we will add the data to them. So let's click OK. And as of now the project is working fine. Let me add a sequence here, and this sequence I'm going to use to add the columns to the data table. So let me give the name here, add columns. Let's open this one, and here I'm going to use the activity add data column from the data table. Let me add this here, and here we'll have to provide the column name. So the column name, make sure that you provide the similar column name which is mentioned in the template. So here I'm going to use the first column name as invoice number. Let me provide the column name inside the double quotes. And in what data table we want to add? We want to add in the extract data table. Let me add it here. In a similar way, let's add another add data column activity, and this time I'm going to use the column name as invoice date. Let's provide it inside the column name, and data table, this time also extract data table. In a similar way, I will add 2 more add data column activities. Let me add it here. Here in the third one, I will provide the column name as company name, data table as extract data table, and the fourth activity, that is add data column. In this activity I am going to provide the column name as total due. Let me take this one and I will provide it as a column name here. And here in the data table, I will provide this extract data table. So we added these four columns inside the extract data table activity according to the requirement. These four column names has been added. Let's move back to flowchart. Now our next step would be to loop through all these rows of the data table and check whether the due date has passed or not. Now if the due date is passed or is today's date, we'll have to extract the data from the invoices and add them in the extract data table. So to do so, let me add another sequence here. Let me add this sequence here. In this sequence, we are going to extract data from the invoices. So here I will provide the name as extract invoice data. And here to loop through each row of the data table, I'm going to use the activity for each row. So let me add this activity here. So here we will go with for each row in extract data table. So for each row in extract data table, we will check whether the due date has passed or is today's date or a future date. So for that I'm going to use the if activity. So let me add this if activity here, and here we'll provide the condition. So in the condition I am going to provide row and the column name for due date is due date. So due date less than equal to date time dot now, which holds the current date. Now here it throws the error because we'll have to convert this one as well into a date time variable. So first of all, let me convert this one into string. So put a dot and select to string from here. Then I'm going to use a function here. So let me write date time dot parse exact. So I'm going to use this function parse exact with all these parameters. So let me add this here, and here we'll provide the parameters. First one will be this parameter, then we'll have to provide the format. Now here you see in the challenge the format here is in ddmmyyyy, so we'll provide the similar format here. So here I will write in the double quotes as dd dash mm dash yyyy. Next we will provide the provider here as a parameter. So for that I will write system dot globalization dot culture info dot invariant culture, and let's close the bracket, and the error has been removed. So let me open this condition. So this is the complete condition which we have provided. Now if this condition is true, that means if the due date has passed or is today's date, in such case we want to extract the data from the invoices. So if this condition is true, first of all we'll have to create two variables here. So for that I'm going to use the assign activity. Let me add this assign activities here. And here in the two, let me provide the variable as say URL, and here we'll provide the expression for that. Now here I'm going to create the URL variable which will store this complete URL of the invoices. Now if you notice, the invoice URLs which get extracted using the data scraping is only a portion of this complete URL. That means only this portion gets extracted. Now to get this complete URL, we have created this URL variable. So let me provide the value there. So I'll provide the value as, let me copy this one from here, and in the value I will provide, so this one will be constant for all the invoices. All the invoices will have this part. Let me remove this slash. URL extracted from the data scraping will have that slash, and then I will put row, and the column name which holds the URL of the invoices is called the URL. And let's convert this one into string. So put a dot and select toString from here. So this one will be the complete URL of all the invoices one by one as the loop iterates. So let's click on OK. Now next assign activity I have used to store the invoice paths when they will be saved locally. So let me show you here. I'm going to store all the invoices which will be downloaded in this folder. So let me copy this path, and here I will provide in the assign, let's create a variable, will say as doc path, that will be the invoice path, and in the value I'm going to provide the inside the double quotes I will provide d colon double slash, then the folder name RPA, and then put a plus and select row URL, and let's convert it into string. So put a dot and select toString from here. So as the loop iterates, all the invoices will be downloaded in this folder if the condition of due date satisfies. So let's click OK. And once we have this URL and the doc path ready, we are good to save the invoices locally. For this, I'm going to use this HTTP request activity. So this is the HTTP request activity under this web API package. So if you do not have this package installed, make sure that you install this uipath.webapi.activities. So let me add this one here. And here we'll have to provide the endpoint. So endpoint I'm going to provide as the URL which we just created. Let's click on OK. And also in this activity we'll have to provide the resource path, that is the path where the invoices will be downloaded. So this will be nothing but the doc path variable which we just created. So now that we have the invoice downloaded in our local system, we are good to extract the invoice data. So let me just save this once. And to extract the invoice data, this we have already learnt in the previous session. We did that using the intelligent OCR and machine learning extractors. This is the project which we created in the previous session. So this exactly similar kind of thing is required here as well. We require to extract the invoice information such as invoice number, date, balance due, and company name. So what we can do, we can either call this workflow or copy the activities from here. So I'm going to copy the activities from here. One thing to notice here is that this assign activity is not required for today. This is the file path. We already created the doc path variable which will serve the same purpose. So let me open this sequence from here. Our interested activities are inside this body. That is, all these activities inside the body are required. So let me copy this body from here. Let me copy this body and I will paste it inside the today's workflow. So here I will paste the complete body. So it has been done. Let me go through them one by one to make sure that all the variables are up to date. First one is the load taxonomy. Looks good. Taxonomy variable is there. Then is the digitized document, which is going to digitize the document and provide the variables as document under document object model and document text. So here we'll have to provide the document path. Document path will be nothing but the doc file variable which we just created, doc path. So let me provide the doc path variable. So error has been removed. So this digitized document will take this doc path variable and in the output it will provide doc text and DOM. And here it's using Omni page OCR to digitize the document. So this looks good. Then comes the data extraction scope which provides the scope for extraction. Here also in the document path I'm going to provide the variable doc path, and every other activity looks good. This is the machine learning extractor. Here we have provided the ML skill which we had created in the previous session. So once the extraction is done, we will get the present validation station. Here also let me provide the doc path variable, and all other details are fine. Next activity with us is the export extraction results, where we are converting the validated results to a dataset variable. So this also looks good. Now we do not require here this for each activity, so I'm going to delete this one. We will directly we will directly pick up the table from this dataset. So for that I'm going to use the assign activity. So let me add the assign activity over here. And here in the value I will provide the expression as we want to get the data table from this dataset variable. So for that I will write dataset dot tables dot item, and inside the brackets we'll have to provide the table name. Now from the previous session we know that the table name here will be simple fields. So this expression is ready, which is going to provide the data table variable. And here the F will be in caps on, so let me provide the F here. So this will be the table name simple fields. Let's click on OK and let's assign this one to the data table variable. So let me create the data table variable here as, let's say, item. And here in the variables, let me search for the item variable which got created. This is the item variable. It will be a variable of type system.data.datatable. And let me change the scope here to flowchart. Now this item data table holds all this information, that is invoice number, invoice date, company name and total due. So from this item data table variable, we will pick up all those invoice information and store them in our final data table, which is the extract data table. So for that what we can do, let me move a bit down here, and here I will use the multiple assign activity. So let me add this multiple assign activity here. And remember that the column names of this item table will be the values which we provided in the taxonomy manager in the previous session. So let me open this one. So here inside the doc type we provided these fields, that is invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company. So the column names will be equivalent to these fields inside the item data table. So let me close this one. And let's begin to provide the values here. So in the value, I'll provide the value as item dot rows, and the row number will be 0, item dot rows, and here we'll provide the column name. So the column name for invoice number is invoice number. So let me provide the column name here, and at the end we'll convert it into string. So put a dot and select to string. Now this value we will assign to the extract data table. So here in the 2 I'll write row, which will be the active row, and here in this data table the column name for invoice number is invoice number. So let me copy this one from here and let's provide it here. Now similar thing we'll do for other columns as well. So here in the next one I'm going to provide item dot rows, row 0, and this time I'm going to take the column name as invoice date, and let's convert it into string. Now one thing to notice here is that the invoices has the date in this format or in any other format. Let me open another invoice. So here the format of all the dates in the invoice are different. Here this is the format and here this is the format. This one is the format. But the sample which the challenge has provided here, in the challenge, the invoice date is in this format, that is date, month, and year. So we'll have to convert the format as well here. So here I'm going to provide the expression as convert dot to date time, and this value will be inside the brackets. Let me close this bracket here, and here we'll provide the format of the date which is required, which is nothing but dd dash mm dash YYYY. So this complete expression we are going to assign to the extract data table. So here in the to section I'm going to provide row, and this time the column name for invoice state is this one. So let me take this one from here and let's provide here. Now for the company we'll do the same thing. So here in the value I'm going to write item dot rows 0, and in the taxonomy manager we have provided the field for company as company. So we'll provide the same here, and here the rows 0 is missing, so let me provide the 0 here, and it is done. Now this one we will assign to the active row, and here the column name will be company name. So I'll provide it here. And the last we want to assign is the date, that is total due, not date, that is the total due. So for this in the value I will write item dot rows, item dot rows 0, and for total due we have provided the field as total amount. So this is the expression which we will assign to the active row of extract data table, which is row, and the column name here will be total due. So we saved the invoices, then we extracted the data from the invoices and stored them inside the extract data table variable. At the end, let me add the output data table to show you how the data table looks like. So here let me add this output data table activity. This activity will take the data table as extract data table, and in the result let me assign to a variable. Let me write dt as string 2, and let's display this one inside a message box. So inside the message box I'm going to provide the dt as string 2 variable. So we are done with the for each row activity. Let me show you. So we are done with this activity for each row in extract data table. If this condition is true, that means if due date is past or is today's date, then it is going to, the workflow is going to store the respective invoice in locally, and then it's going to extract the data, required data from the invoices, and at the end it's going to store the extracted invoice data inside this extract data table variable. Now at the end it is also going to display the data table as a message box. So we are done with this one. Let's move to the flowchart. Now we'll have to do some cleanups here. What all cleanups are required, let me show you. So you know that from the data scraping we also extracted the invoice URLs, which are not a part of final result. So you see the invoice URLs are not a part of final result. So we'll have to remove that column which has the invoice URL. Also the data table as of now which we have, that is the extract data table. The extract data table also holds the records, also holds the rows which has the due date of future date. So we do not require to hold those records in our final one, in our final record. So we'll have to do such cleanups. So let me add a sequence here and I will connect this one. Let me open this sequence and here I'm going to use remove data column. Let me add it here and the data table here will be extract data table. We want to remove from extract data table. And what column name we want to remove? We want to remove the column name URL. It is not required. Also, we want to remove the rows where the due date is of future date. So for that, I'm going to use the activity filter data table. Let me add this filter data table here. Let's open this filter wizard and the input data table here will be extract data table and output also I'm going to take as the same one. Now here we'll have to provide the filtering mode, so we will filter on the basis of a column. Now if you notice, if the due date is of future date, then those records would not have these values, that is invoice number, invoice date, company name and total due, as we have extracted these data only for the due dates which has passed or is today's date. So I'm going to use this condition here. I'm going to say here column name, that is invoice number. Let me provide it inside double quotes. Invoice number is empty. So for such due dates which is a future date, the invoice number will be empty. And let's click on OK. So this filter data table is going to remove all such rows which has the due date of a future date. So the cleanup has been done. At the end we'll have to write the data to a CSV file. So for that I'm going to use the CSV activity, that is write CSV. Let me add it here and here we'll provide the file path. So hit browse. And from this project folder, I already have a result CSV file. It is empty as of now. So I'm going to write it inside the result CSV file. So let's save this one, and data table we want to use is extract data table. We want to write from extract data table and including headers. So all done under this sequence. Now once we have the data written inside a CSV file, we'll have to submit that one as well. So for that, let me add another sequence. And here I will give the name as submit CSV. Let's open this one. And here first of all, I will use the attach browser activity. Let me add it here. And I will indicate, let me close this one. I will indicate this browser. And here in the browser I will use the variable which we created in the very beginning of the session, that is browser RPA challenge, and browser type will be Chrome. That is fine. And I'm going to remove the selector. Now I'm going to use the click activity. Let me add this click activity here and I'm going to indicate this submit button on the screen. So let me indicate this one. Also, when we click on this submit button, we get this window where we'll have to provide the file path. So I'm going to add the activity type into. So let me use this type into activity here. And we'll indicate this element inside the browser. So let me indicate this one. And here I will also provide the file path of the result CSV file, which will be this one, result.csv. So let me provide the file path here. And at the end, once we provide the file path, we'll have to hit enter. So for that, I'm going to let me cancel this as of now, and here I'm going to use the send hotkey activity. And the key which we want to choose here is the enter. So let me select the enter from here. So by this process, we will be able to submit the CSV file to the RPA challenge website. Also, let me add this output data table activity here as well to show you the data table, which how it looks like when the cleanup is done. So here I will provide output data table. And let's create a string variable here, say result string. Let me add a message box to show you the results. I will provide here result string. And all done. Let's move back to the flowchart again. So our project is ready. Let me quickly recap for you what all our project will be doing. First of all, it is going to launch RPA challenge, that is invoice extraction URL in a Chrome browser, and click on the start button. Then it's going to do the data scraping for the data which we have in the tables, that is ID, due date and invoice URL. Next, it is going to add columns for invoice number, invoice date, company name and total due. Now once we have all the columns with us, then we will extract the invoice data, and we will do so based on the condition, that is whether the due date has passed or is today's date. Now if this condition is true, then first of all we will save the invoices locally in the system. Now here the endpoint, it is not as a variable, so we have created the variable URL. So let me provide the URL variable here. Now once the invoice has been saved to the system locally, then we will extract the data from the invoices using the intelligent OCR and machine learning extractor with all these activities. And once we get all the invoice data inside the table, that is item, we will assign all those values to the extract data table variable. So in this way, we are going to extract the data from the invoices. Now after that, we require to do some cleanup in the data table. That is, we will remove the column URL, which holds the invoice URL. This is not a part of final result, so we'll remove this column. Then we require only those records, we require only those rows in the data table whose due date has passed or is today's date. That means for such records, we will have some values of invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company name. So accordingly, we'll provide here invoice number. Invoice number is not empty. We require those records whose invoice number is not empty. So let's click OK. And at the end, we will write the data table to the CSV file. Now moving back to the flowchart. And once we write the data to the CSV, at the end we will submit the CSV file to the RPA challenge website. So let's move to flowchart again. Let's save this project, and I'm going to, let's close this one. Let's close this RPA challenge website, and I'm going to quickly run this project to see how it works. And my project is working now. It is launching the RPA challenge website. Clicked on start button, then it will do the data scraping. So this is the data which got extracted using the data scraping functionality. Let's click on OK. Now for each of the rows inside that data table, it is going to extract, the workflow is going to extract the invoice data whose due date has passed or is today's date. And here we get the present validation state for the invoice. So we'll have to match these fields whether it has been extracted correctly or not. So the invoice number has been extracted correctly, then due date is also correct, invoice date is also correct, then total amount is also correct, and company name is also correct. So all of them looks good. Let's hit save. And for the invoice which we just validated, the data from the invoice got extracted and has been added in this extract data table. Let's click on OK. Then this is the validation station for invoice 11. So let's validate this one. Invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company all looks good. Let's hit save and the data got added to the extract data table. Then comes the validation station for invoice 10. So invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company all looks good. Let's hit save and the data got added for this as well. Now similar for invoice 7, invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company looks good from here. So let's hit save and the data got added. And here comes the validation station for invoice 12, invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company looks good. Let's hit save. Data got added. And here comes the validation station for invoice 8. This is the invoice number, invoice date, total amount and company. Let's hit save and the data got added for invoice 8 as well. So the validations has been done and data table has been cleaned as well. Here you see there is no column as URL. Also the rows which are present here has the due date which has passed or is today's date. So the data has been cleaned. Now it will be written to the CSV file and uploaded here. So let's hit OK. And now it's trying to upload it here. Clicked on submit button. And here it is trying to upload the file. And the project is over and the challenge is completed successfully. So in this way you can work on this invoice data extraction RPA challenge. And that's all for this session guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and if you did, give it a like and share with your friends. Hit the bell button to get the updates on the latest videos. And if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please subscribe to our channel as well and I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye bye.